Hello and welcome back. I'm Eric Sunset, your host of the DocBuddy Journal. Here at DocBuddy, we deliver healthcare solutions that take the pain and cost out of broken workflows, like with our OpNote solution, which gives ASCs and their affiliated clinics the power of instantly generated operative reports, all approved from the point of care. You can learn more about OpNote and all of our solutions at DocBuddy.com. So welcome back. It's a little bit of a break in tendency here. This is our first solo show in a little while, and we have really had some fantastic guests join us over the last few months. Most recently, we had Tim Burney, the CEO of Advantian, one of DocBuddy's newest partners. Would highly encourage you to listen to that episode. Prior to that, we had guests like Dr. Dan Blumenthal, who's the Chief Quality Officer at CVA USA, join us, and he actually joined us for a second time. So while it may be a little bit of a letdown not to have an expert on the show today, it's still going to be a good one for you. And before we get into the core topic, which is around ASCs sounding the alarm on mounting threats, I want to let you know where you can catch DocBuddy through the end of the 2024 roadshow season. Starting next week, we will be at the 30th annual meeting of the Business and Operation of ASCs, which is a Becker's healthcare event. That one is happening October 30th through November 2nd. And speaking of breaks in tendency, up until fairly recently, all of the Becker's events were happening at the Swiss Hotel in Chicago. This event, the Business and Operations of ASCs, is taking place at the Hyatt Regency Chicago. So a lot of great events at the Swiss Hotel. We know this one will be a good one too. And then following the 30th annual meeting of the Business and Operations of ASCs, which is October 30th through November 2nd, that next week we will be in beautiful Tulalip, Washington for the Washington Ambulatory Surgery Center Association's 2024 Annual Education Conference and Trade Show. That one is happening November 7th through 8th at the Tulalip Resort and Spa in Tulalip, Washington. And that'll do it. That is all of the DocBuddy Roadshow wrapped up for 2024. And then 2025 is right around the corner. So we'll, of course, let you know where we'll be next year. But if you're going to be at either the Becker's ASC event or the Washington Ambulatory Surgery Center Association event, send an email over to sales@docbuddy.com. You can set up a dedicated time to meet with a member of our team. Of course, you're always welcome to just drop by the booth. There's a really good chance that we'll have a Celsius with your name on it to come by, grab a refreshment, chat with the DocBuddy team, check out OpNote, check out all of our solutions, and that will be that. So we look forward to seeing you there. And now, turning our attention to the core of the episode, this Becker's ASC article, ASCs sound the alarm on mounting threats, and the question that they ask their panel or their respondents is, what scares you for the future of ASCs and why? Regular listeners of the DocBuddy Journal, or even if you're just plugged into the ASC space, none of these are going to be a surprise, but one thing that was pretty interesting to me was around how dire the responses were, kind of how grim the responses were to this prompt. So again, what scares you for the future of ASCs and why? You know, earlier in the year, we were kind of recognizing there's a staffing shortage. We're recognizing reimbursement headwinds. We're recognizing the rising cost of doing business. But as we are here in Q4 of 2024, so today's October 24th when we're recording this, the responses are more than just we're keeping an eye on it. It's more along the lines of something needs to be done about this. And I would tend to agree. And when you look at there were 7 respondents, all gave sort of a paragraph or two's worth of response. You know, the rising cost of doing business was a concern echoed by many. But then reimbursement challenges, staffing shortages, a lack of anesthesiologists, and regulatory red tape, these are all sort of echoed throughout each of the respondents. And when you look at the rising costs and reimbursement challenges, obviously this is a primary concern for ASCs. And reading into the show, I invoked Tim Burney, CEO of our partner Advantian. If cost and implant supplies and the management thereof is an issue for your ASC, or it's something you think you can do better with, I would highly highly recommend that you connect with the team at Advantian. Tell them Eric sent you too. Let him know you heard about it on the podcast. Listen to his show, which I believe is the most recent episode prior to this one. They can help you get your arms around case profitability and managing costs of supplies and implants. But post-COVID, I mean, COVID spiked the price of all across the supply chain and really increased operational demands to have to manage that supply chain a lot more closely than maybe you had to in the past. Despite an ever-increasing demand for outpatient procedures, both with an eye towards the increasing cost for ASCs and declining reimbursement, the current landscape really favors the hospitals over these smaller and potentially independent ASCs, or even ASCs operated by a management company. And the imbalance here is making it tough to stay competitive for certain procedures, if not all procedures, for ASCs. If they're getting a lower payment for the same procedure the hospitals are billing for, there's something out of alignment there. There's something regulatory out of alignment there, because when you look at the ASC being the win-win-win for the patient, the provider, and the payer, if people don't have access to procedures at the ASC because the hospital pays more, something needs to be done, clearly. And then looking towards one of the top responses across all the national surveys around burnout for workforce shortages, this is mission critical. I mean, as an ASC, you can sort of get by with really thin headcount, maybe for your front desk and your reception area. Wouldn't be ideal, but you could kind of stretch there. You can't stretch a lack of anesthesiologists. You can't stretch to cover that you have no anesthesia coverage. You can't stretch to cover if you don't have any nurses or sterile techs or folks with more hands-on on the clinical side of things. That's not something that you can work around. So that, again, really common refrain through this whole year. But when you're operating as an ASC with a smaller team than that hospital, and you're finding it hard to attract, hire, and retain talent when that health system or that hospital is able to potentially pay more, potentially be able to offer better benefits, there's an answer to this, but it does make it a very strong headwind indeed that there's a more attractive employer just down the road from you. But it comes down to culture, and it really comes down to operating an ASC as effectively as you can. And I do want to point out, you've heard us talk about this on the show before, that ASCs are obviously doing more with less staffing than they've ever had to operate that way before. It's not self-inflicted that the hiring market is as tough as it is, or that the talent pool is as narrow and shallow as it is, but there are still some things that you can do as an ASC, and obviously I'm a little bit biased because DocBuddy provides one of these solutions, but until fairly recently there's been really little adoption of meaningful digital workflows in the ASC, and that's where DocBuddy comes in with OpNote, that essentially every phase of labor at the ASC is part of that operative report supply chain. Whether it's the surgeon who is creating them and approving them, and then they go to the administrator to verify that they're signed and completed, they go to the billing team to verify that they're signed and created, and then that claim can actually enter the revenue cycle. With DocBuddy OpNote, you're removing all of that paper chasing, even the distribution of completed operative reports to the clinic. We're able to give the provider the workflow that they really like and that they prefer, which is dictation, and that's of course over their EHR, over using something like Dragon into a Word document, which is just crazy, but we still see it. We're still replacing that process across the country with OpNote, but you're able to give that surgeon the workflow they really like and digitize the outcome for the rest of the downstream stakeholders. And there's even implications here for your IPONs, your immediate post-operative notes, that if you've got a fully fleshed out, completed, and signed operative report, you're able to remove that step from your process, that step being the IPON. So as these ASCs face workforce shortages, there are things that you can do, and I would encourage you to listen to a prior episode of the show with Todd Currier, the CEO of Bend Surgery Center, where he talks a lot about culture and acknowledges that there's always going to be somebody that can pay you more, but are they doing the same job in the same environment? Do they get the same perks and fringe benefits that exist at the ASC for employees? Well, no, they don't. Not if you're working at the hospital. So while, again, let's acknowledge the headwind of workforce shortages, there are cultural things that you can implement at your ASC, as well as technology that you can implement to ease some of these workforce shortages. So what would I do with the magic wand to ease some of these headwinds that ASCs are flying into? Well, I want to start with a quote from the article. This is Joe Peluso, administrator at Estique Surgical Center up there in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And I'll paraphrase here, but the overall rising costs are expected to grow approximately 8% by 2025 due to ongoing inflationary pressures, as well as evolving regulatory demands. ASCs are being forced to do more with less. The delays in payers moving to fair and equitable site-neutral payments, and CMS being slow to transition more procedures that can be safely performed in the ASC, end quote there. This isn't something you'll normally hear me say on the DocBuddy Journal, but now is the time where you can solve some problems with the stroke of a pen. And when you have these sites, not neutral payments happening where the hospital is reimbursed at such a higher rate, yet we're seeing as good or better patient outcomes for the same procedure when the procedure's done at the ASC, again, something's out of alignment there. The payer, the provider, and the patient should all be clamoring to have the procedures done at the ASC when they can. And I certainly don't have any clinical input on this, but if you qualify to have a procedure done at the ASC, there should be no economic reason that you shouldn't be able to have it done there. So let's get that right in a regulatory and in a law sense of the word. And with that, I think we're in a spot to close out this episode. As usual, we'll ask that you subscribe to the DocBuddy Journal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also get the newest episodes of the show on our site, docbuddy.com/blog. Be sure that you're following DocBuddy on LinkedIn so that you always stay up to date with all the news and developments from DocBuddy. And on behalf of the entire team, I want to say thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.